Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices, and you can sign up for product alerts. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to enter the futuristic universe of Red Rising, which is based on the book series by Pierce Brown, featuring a dystopian society divided into 14 castes. Now Red Rising is a hand management combo building game for 1 to 6 players, plays in 45 to 60 minutes, for ages 14 and up, and published by Stonemaier Games. And I'm going to give you a pretty quick overview, high level of how the game works, what the different cards do, some of the interactions. Hopefully this will give you a good idea of what the game's about. One thing I love is when publishers put nice art on the back of the board. It has no functionality, but it's just a nice touch, and I love it when publishers do this, and this picture is gorgeous. Now here's the board set up for Red Rising with 4 players. There's 4 different locations that will have characters: Jupiter, Mars, Luna, and the Institute. Over the course of the game, characters are going to be brought out and taken from the board. Each player is going to start with 5 character cards in their hand, and over the course of the game you're going to be playing cards, gathering cards, and sometimes even adding cards to your hand, having more than 5 in there. And the cards are the main part of the game, because not only will each card that you have in your hand score you points at the end of the game from the top core value, they'll also score you points depending on certain conditions on the bottom. For example, if the Diana is with another red card, this will be worth 26 plus the 9 core value. So they do all different things, like Mod Job will be 5 points for each red and brown card, including Mod Job. So if you had these 2 and you wanted to keep them towards the end of the game, you'd be working on a strategy trying to collect reds and browns. Or maybe with Zanzibar, if the core value of each of your cards is an odd number, which in this case I have a few evens, if I wanted to go with this strategy, I'd want to end up with cards that only have odd numbers, but it's a whopping 31 points at the end added to this core value, so that could be a good strategy depending on your cards. Turns are very simple in this game. Typically you're going to be placing a card, then drawing a card. When you place a card, you're deploying it down onto the board into any of the 4 locations on top of the other cards. And then you'll be able to take a deployment action. Like this one says, if deployed on the Institute, which is the location I placed it, I can advance once on the fleet track. Now the fleet track is another way to gain points. At the end of the game, you'll get a certain amount of points depending on how far you moved up on the fleet track. And then you're going to draw a card, and you have to draw one from a location that's not where you just placed. So in this case, anywhere other than the Institute. And when you draw a card, you're going to take the action of that location. If I took this card from Jupiter, I would simply move up the fleet track again. Blue, blue, ships going up the fleet track. Makes sense. If I take a card from Mars, Mars is red, and it kind of tells you we're going to take this red helium. These are going to be worth 3 points by default at the end of the game. Another strategy you could go after. If you took from Luna, you'd take this Sovereign token, which matches this token here. Even if another player has it, you'll take it. Now this Sovereign token will be worth 10 points at the end of the game if you have it at the end, but it also allows you to activate your house tile. You're randomly given one of these at the beginning of the game. Most of these have to do with the same types of abilities I already talked about, like if you had Mars as your randomized tile for the whole game, whenever you get this Sovereign tile, you'll be able to gain 1 helium. And if the card you drew was from the Institute, you'd be able to place an influence of your cube color to the Institute. Now this is important because at the end of the game, each of your influence cubes are going to be worth a certain amount of points depending on if you have first, second, or third most. First most are each worth 4 points. So this player has the most. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's going to be worth 6 times 4, 24 points. But second place has 1, 2, 3, 4. That's worth 2 points. So they're going to get 8 points, and third place is just going to get 1 point for each of them. So this is a big sort of area majority thing for the end of the game scoring. Now sometimes instead of taking one of the cards here, you might want to just draw one randomly off the deck, and when you do that you'll add that to your hand, but you'll also roll this die, and this die mostly has the abilities that we already talked about from the different locations, but they might do other things like banishing a card from the top of a location, now allowing you to see what the next card is below it, possibly someone else getting that one. This will continue with players taking clockwise turns until a certain combination of players get to 7 on the track, 7 cubes, and or 7 helium. There's different combinations that trigger the end of the game. Then you'll go to final scoring. And there's a score pad to track all the scores. As I mentioned, you're going to be getting points for the cards, the abilities, and the actual core values, how far you moved in the fleet track, 3 points for each of your helium by default, 10 points if you had that single sovereign token, and a certain amount of points for each cube depending the majorities on the Institute. And if you have more than 7 cards, each card over that is worth -10, and then whoever has the most points is the winner. Now there are a ton of character cards, 112 of them in the game, and I've shown you some of them before, but let me just show you a little bit more of these. I tried to pick a good cross-section of all the different sort of colors that are there, and some of the abilities at the end of the game. Like this one gives you 15 points if with Servo. Here's Servo here, and this gives you 20 points if with Victra, the Howlers, or a red. So some of them match together. This one would be 15 points if with Darrow, but minus 15 if with Mickey. This one 20 if with Ragnar, or minus 5 for each gold card you might have. This one's 29 if you have the most helium or tied for the most. This one is 15 if you have at least 3 helium, 3 influence on the influence track, and have at least level 3 of the fleet track. So getting 3 in all the main sort of strategies there. This one 2 for each of your influence on at the Institute, so where you're placing those cubes for majority. This one is, at the end of the game, you can treat this card if it's any other one color in addition to gray, because some of them are like, hey, if you have a gold, for example. This one says 10 points if you have a gold. If you have this card at the end, you could treat this as a gold to get that 10 points. So a lot of combo building. This one also gives you 5 points for each red and brown on all locations. So sometimes you're trying to seed locations in order to get points. 19 points if you and opponent have the exact same amount of influence on the Institute. So you're kind of playing with that, but they might not know because maybe you drew this card from the top of the deck. This one, at the end of the game, you reveal the top card of the deck and gain the points equal to that card's core value. This one, you get a certain amount of points depending on what range you're in the fleet track. So you can see there's many different strategies from a lot of these different cards, and this is just a small cross-section of them. The game also comes with a full Automa solo system that you can play with a competitive solo game. Now this version here is actually the collector's edition, which has metal tokens and fleet chips, as well as it comes with some card holders for each of the colors so that you don't have to hold the cards throughout the entire game. All right, well now there is an overview that should give you a feel for how the game works and how to play without having to go into every single rule like my patented rule schools tutorials that I often do. This is just giving you a higher level. Now, there's certain embargoes for this game and certain dates, and at this point, the review embargo has not been lifted, but we were able to publish videos about the game itself as how the game works, playthroughs and things like that today. So I wanted to give you information as fast as I could so that you could see if this game might be for you. Again, that's Red Rising from Stonemaier Games.